My sister swapped my blood thinners with Clean's pills and said, "See, you're not really sick." I collapsed hours later as she whispered, "Stop pretending." But at the will reading, the lawyer opened Grandpa's file, and her face went pale. It had been years since I had last stepped foot in my parents' house, yet the moment I drove into the driveway, it felt like no time had passed at all. My sister Rachel's white BMW was parked in my usual spot, as always. Of course, she was here early. She'd been here for days already, helping Mom prepare for the will reading tomorrow. It was as if I wasn't even a part of this family. No one had thought to invite me early, no surprise there. As I entered, the familiar scent of Mom's cooking mingled with the faint smell of fresh flowers. Rachel had probably arranged them herself. They were always her thing, the kind of thing that made everything look perfect, pristine. My mom barely looked up from the salad she was tossing. "Melissa, you made it," she said, her voice flat, as if she barely noticed me standing there. Rachel, of course, had claimed her place. She was always the golden child, the one who excelled in everything and demanded attention with every little thing she did. Designer luggage in the best guest room. Laughing with Dad in the kitchen, completely at ease, while I was invisible. "Rachel's been such a help," Mom added, still not really noticing me. "She even coordinated with the caterers for tomorrow's lunch." I nodded, forcing a smile. "I got promoted last month. Senior analyst now," I said, trying to make a small victory feel bigger. Mom barely acknowledged it. "That's nice, dear." She went right back to talking about Rachel, how she had picked out the lovely flowers for tomorrow. I swallowed the sting, feeling the usual bitterness rising in my chest. Nothing was ever about me. I had worked so hard to get here, yet no one really noticed. But what struck me as odd, more than anything, was Rachel's behavior. She was being unusually attentive. She brought me water without being asked, checked to see if I had taken my medication, something she had never done before. "You still take those pills twice a day, right? Morning and evening?" She asked with a strange intensity, as if she actually cared. She had always brushed off my heart condition before, rolling her eyes whenever I mentioned doctors or treatments. But now, she was watching me swallow my blood thinners, like they were the most important thing in the world. I told myself it was grief. Grandpa's death had affected us all in different ways. Maybe Rachel was just grieving differently. But even with that explanation, my instincts kicked in. I started noticing other things about her. Her handbag was last season's, an unusual choice for someone who refreshed her wardrobe constantly. Her nails were chipped and bitten down. She checked her phone obsessively, stepping outside for hushed, urgent calls. At dinner, her credit card was declined when she tried to pay for the wine she ordered. She laughed it off, claiming it was a fraud alert. But I saw the tremble in her hands as she slid the card back into her wallet. But it wasn't until after dessert, when her phone rang, that the real tension began. That was Mr. Morris and Grandpa's lawyer, Rachel announced, her voice a little too bright. "He said Grandpa left specific instructions. The reading will be recorded. And there's some sealed document that can only be opened under certain conditions." I watched her closely. She excused herself right after, stepping into the hallway to make another call. Her voice dropped to a whisper, sharp and cutting. Something about it didn't sit right with me. I couldn't sleep that night. And the next morning, I felt worse than ever. My heart pounded in my chest, a frantic rhythm that left me breathless. When I looked in the mirror, my face was pale, almost gray, and my fingers tingled with a strange numbness. I blamed nerves. After all, Grandpa's will was being read today. The stress of it all had to be getting to me, right? But as I drove to the lawyer's office with Rachel in the front seat, talking about the weather like it was a normal day, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. By the time we reached the law office, I could barely breathe. My heart was racing so loudly, I thought the whole room could hear it. The air conditioning didn't help, it made the room feel colder, and I could feel the sweat seeping through my blouse. I sat at the conference table, gripping the armrest as another wave of dizziness hit. My vision blurred, then cleared, then blurred again. The nausea rose in my throat, and I reached into my purse for my medication. That's when I noticed something that froze me in place. The pills in my bottle looked right, same size, same color, same shape, but they didn't feel right. I had been taking my blood thinners religiously, twice a day, but the symptoms were getting worse, not better. I took a photo of the pills. I didn't know why, but I felt like I needed proof. I sent the photo to Dana, my college friend who worked as an ER nurse. I typed quickly, "Hey, weird question. I've felt off all week, heart racing, dizzy, fatigued. Does this look like my usual medication?" I didn't expect a response right away. Dana worked night shifts, but I had to know. Something was wrong, and I needed to document it. Just before I could second guess myself, the lawyer entered the room. His presence, though somber, couldn't drown out the panic that was rising in my chest. But there was nothing I could do. I had to take the pill in my hand, even if something inside me screamed that it wasn't the right one. As the lawyer spoke, his words barely registered. My pulse was the only thing I could hear, louder than anything else in the room. "Mr. Gray's will be read now," he said, settling into his chair. His voice was calm, but I could barely focus. Then I felt it. The crushing pressure in my chest, a weight I couldn't escape, and my heart seemed to stop altogether. I reached for the table to steady myself, but it was too late. The world went dark. I woke up to the sound of muffled voices. I wasn't sure where I was at first. But then the sterile smell of antiseptic hit me, and I knew I was in a hospital room. The beeping of machines was rhythmic, but I couldn't focus on anything but the sharp pain in my chest. It felt like someone had placed a heavy weight on me, pressing down until I couldn't breathe. My mouth was dry, and when I tried to move, a wave of dizziness hit me so hard, I had to close my eyes to steady myself. I opened them again slowly. The room was dim, with the blinds pulled down, the late afternoon light barely creeping through. I could make out the outlines of people standing by the bed, but they seemed far away. My mind was still foggy. I tried to speak, but my throat felt like sandpaper. It took me a moment to gather the strength to focus on the faces around me. My parents were there, looking pale, their eyes wide with worry. But it was Rachel I focused on. She was standing behind them, her face unreadable. The moment I tried to speak, I realized something. No one had really spoken to me. They were all waiting for me to say something, but no one was offering me any comfort. It was just the cold, sterile room and their eyes on me. Rachel's eyes, cold and distant, held my gaze for a moment before she quickly looked away, as though she had more important things to focus on. A nurse entered the room, breaking the silence. "Miss Gray, you're awake. How are you feeling?" I wanted to respond, to tell her everything, but all I could manage was a hoarse whisper. "What happened?" The nurse gave me a sympathetic smile, but her eyes flickered to my parents. "You experienced a severe cardiac event. It was caused by sudden withdrawal from your medication. You've been without your usual blood thinners for about 72 hours. I felt my chest tighten, the panic beginning to rise. "What do you mean? No medication?" The nurse's expression softened. "Someone switched your medication, Miss Gray. The pills you were taking for your heart condition, those were B12 vitamins, not your usual blood thinners." B12. I felt like the world had tilted beneath me. B12. That didn't make sense. I had been taking my medication religiously. I had kept track, made sure I was doing everything right. But somehow, someone had switched them. My heart began to race again, this time from a mixture of confusion and fear. I struggled to breathe, the tightness in my chest returning. Rachel stepped forward, her voice smooth, but laced with something I couldn't quite place. It was probably a mix-up. "Melissa's always so scatterbrained lately, you know. She must have confused the bottles." I couldn't even look at her. My eyes stayed on the nurse. "I didn't mix them up. Someone switched them." The words came out more firmly than I expected, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I felt some clarity. Someone had done this to me. The nurse's eyes flicked to my parents, but she didn't press the issue. "We're going to keep you here for a while, Miss Gray. You need rest and careful monitoring." The room grew quieter, and my parents exchanged a look I couldn't read. It was Rachel who spoke again, her voice almost too calm. "We're just glad you're okay, Melissa," she said. "I knew you'd pull through." But her tone didn't match the words. There was something in the way she looked at me that made my skin crawl, something that didn't sit right. She was acting too perfect, too polished, and I could see the faintest flicker of something behind her eyes. It was like she was waiting for me to say something, waiting for me to collapse again. Only this time, she'd have everything under control. I turned my head slowly, trying to get a better look at my parents. My mother was on the verge of tears, her hands wringing in her lap. My father, however, just looked tired, his face drawn with an emotion I couldn't quite place. It was like he'd aged 10 years overnight, and he couldn't decide whether to comfort me or simply let the storm pass. I realized, then, that they were more concerned with Rachel's approval than they were with my health. A part of me wanted to scream, to tell them everything, to ask how they could let this happen, but I couldn't. I didn't have the energy. Instead, I took a deep breath, feeling the sharp sting of the needles in my arm, and made a decision. I would figure this out. I would find out who had done this to me, who had sabotaged my life like this. Because I knew it wasn't just a simple mix-up. Someone had intentionally hurt me, and I was finally awake enough to see the truth. I had been in the dark for so long, pretending everything was fine when it wasn't. But now, I couldn't ignore it. I wouldn't let it go. My family might have been content with their little game, of pretending everything was perfect. But I was done with the lies. The nurse returned with some paperwork, but I wasn't listening anymore. My thoughts were consumed by one thing: Rachel. Something about her had always felt off, but now I knew for sure. She had gone too far, and this time, I wasn't going to be the one to get hurt. I was awake now, both physically and emotionally. And I would not go back to being invisible. I don't know how long I was out, but when I came to again, the sharp beeping of the machines made it clear I was still in the hospital. The sterile, almost suffocating smell of antiseptic filled my nose, and the constant buzz of overhead lights was beginning to grate on my nerves. My body ached everywhere, but especially my chest, as if something had broken inside me. I tried to sit up, but my body refused to cooperate. My limbs heavy and unresponsive. Through the fog in my mind, I could hear voices in the background. My parents were there, but they didn't sound the way I remembered. Their voices seemed distant, muffled, like I was hearing them through a wall. I focused on their words, trying to piece together what was happening. "She's awake now," my mother's voice said. "We were so scared. You gave us a fright, honey." "Yeah," my father added, his voice tight. "You scared us all. But you're gonna be okay, Mia." I wanted to say something. To tell them that I was more than okay. That I was furious. But my throat was dry. And the words wouldn't come. I could feel the anger building inside me. But it was tangled with something else. Something I couldn't quite name. I wanted answers. I needed to understand what had happened. Rachel was in the room too, though she hadn't said anything yet. She stood near the corner, her arms crossed over her chest, her expression carefully neutral. She didn't look worried. In fact, she looked almost pleased. "Mom, Dad, I think we should give her some space," Rachel said, her voice oddly calm. "Mia's probably exhausted." I could barely make out the words, but the tone in her voice made something inside me snap. She wasn't even pretending to care about me. She was pretending to be the concerned sister. She was pretending to be the one who cared. But I knew. I knew she had been the one behind everything. I wanted to scream at her, to demand why she'd done this to me. I wanted to yell about the pills, about how she'd switched my heart medication with B12 vitamins, how I could have died because of her. But I couldn't. My body wouldn't cooperate. I could barely lift my hand to wipe the tears that had started to gather in my eyes. The silence stretched out, broken only by the soft beep of the monitor attached to me. Rachel's eyes were on me now, but there was no concern in them. No guilt, only something cold, calculating. Something I had seen before, but never this clear. "You should rest, Mia," she said finally, taking a step closer to my bed. "You're lucky this time. Just don't let it happen again." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. Lucky? I wasn't lucky. I was alive because I had fought to stay that way. My heart had fought against the poison she had put in my body. And now she was acting like nothing had happened. As if it was all just a little mistake. I didn't know how much time had passed. But the nurse came back into the room soon after. She checked my vitals, her movements professional but quick. I barely noticed her. My eyes were fixed on Rachel, who was still standing there, watching me with that same unreadable expression. "You should let her speak to her sister," my mother said softly to Rachel. "Give her some space." Rachel didn't say anything at first. Then she nodded, her lips pressing into a thin line. "I'll be downstairs," she muttered, and walked out of the room, leaving me alone with my parents. As soon as the door clicked shut behind her, I let out the breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. My father stood up, his face pale and drawn. "Mia," he started, his voice softer now. We didn't know she was doing that to you." I didn't believe him. Not really. For years, they had looked the other way. They had allowed Rachel to take whatever she wanted, and let me suffer in silence. They had allowed her to tear me down, piece by piece, and I had let them. I had let myself believe that maybe it was me. Maybe I was just too much. But now, after everything that had happened, I knew the truth. "You knew," I whispered hoarsely. "You always knew. You just didn't care." They both looked shocked, like my words had cut through them in a way they hadn't expected. My mother's eyes filled with tears, and she stepped closer, reaching for my hand. "Mia, please, don't say that. We've always cared." "We've always." "You didn't." I cut her off. "You didn't care. You let her do this to me. You let her take everything from me, and still made excuses for her." The words were coming faster now, my anger breaking through the fog of pain in my chest. I was tired. I was so tired of pretending that everything was fine when it wasn't. I was tired of pretending that Rachel's actions didn't hurt. But most of all, I was tired of pretending that they cared enough to stop her. My father stepped back, his face crumpling. He opened his mouth as if to say something, but no words came. My mother was crying now, her face buried in her hands. But I didn't feel sympathy for her. I couldn't. They were only sorry because I had finally woken up. But they hadn't been there for me when I needed them. They hadn't been there when Rachel had nearly destroyed me. And Rachel had gone too far. She had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. I didn't know how or when, but I was going to make sure she paid for this. For everything. The anger and the hurt settled deep inside me. I wasn't going to let her get away with this. Not this time. The next few days blurred together in a haze of medical appointments and phone calls, all punctuated by the dull ache in my chest and the constant reminder of what had nearly happened. I kept telling myself that I was lucky to be alive, but it didn't feel like luck. It felt like betrayal. And every time I closed my eyes, the image of Rachel's cold, calculating gaze flashed in my mind. I couldn't shake it. I was at home now, trying to rest. But the silence felt suffocating. Rachel had barely called. No apologies. No checking in to see if I was okay. She just disappeared into the background, as if nothing had happened. It was the same old pattern. She always managed to control the situation, to hide behind her perfect facade. But this time, I wasn't going to let her get away with it. I had to make sure I had proof. I couldn't just trust my instincts. I needed something concrete. I spent the next few days on edge, my eyes glued to my phone, waiting for the moment when I could take the next step. It wasn't until I received a message from Dana, my old college friend, that everything finally fell into place. She had responded to the picture I sent her from the hospital. The one with the pills that didn't match my usual prescription. Her message was simple, but it hit me like a wave. "Those aren't your pills, Mia. That's B12. Where's your real medication? This is serious. Call me now." I stared at the message, the words sinking in slowly. Rachel had done this. She had intentionally swapped my blood thinners for something that would make me sick, something that wouldn't save my life if I needed it. My sister had tried to kill me. I felt numb, like I was floating above my body. I had always suspected Rachel was capable of cruelty, but this was something else. I didn't know whether to feel rage, fear, or something colder. But one thing was clear. Rachel's plan had nearly succeeded. She had been willing to watch me die, to let me collapse, just to cover up whatever she had been hiding. I knew I had to confront her. I couldn't let her get away with it. But part of me wasn't sure how. After all these years of living in her shadow, of being the one who was always overlooked, could I really stand up to her now? That night, I gathered everything I had: Dana's message, the photo of the pills, my notes about Rachel's strange behavior. Everything I could find that might expose the truth. It was a shaky start, but it was enough. The next morning, I met with Attorney Morrison. He had been handling Grandpa's estate, and I knew he had the power to help me get answers. I sat across from him in his office, feeling a tightness in my chest that wasn't just from my heart condition. It was fear, the fear of what I would learn. The fear of what would happen once I spoke the truth. "Attorney Morrison," I said, my voice hoarse, but steady. "I need to show you something." He looked at me with a mix of curiosity and concern. "What is it, Mia?" I pulled out my phone and handed it to him. "This." I showed him the photos of the pills, the message from Dana. I didn't mix up my medication. Rachel switched them. I almost died because of it. Morrison's eyes widened. But he didn't say anything right away. He took the phone from me, his gaze shifting from the screen to my face. Then he sighed, a low, troubled sound. "This is serious. If what you're saying is true, it's more than just a medical error. It's attempted harm." I nodded, feeling the weight of the words settle in. "I know. We'll need more than this to prove it," Morrison said. "But this is a good start." I felt the knot in my stomach tighten. "What does that mean?" "It means we'll need to investigate. We'll need to look at the records, see if there's anything else we can find that ties her to this." He paused, staring at the phone in his hand. "But Mia, if Rachel did this, if she switched your medication on purpose, this is beyond anything we've seen." I could hear the concern in his voice, but I wasn't sure what I expected. I wasn't sure what I was asking for anymore. Justice. Revenge. All I knew was that I couldn't let Rachel walk away from this. I spent the next few days gathering everything I could. Every conversation I could remember. Every strange look Rachel had given me. Every moment when I had felt like something wasn't right. I wrote it all down. Organized it like I had with my financial reports at work. I didn't know how it would end, but I knew I had to see it through. I couldn't let Rachel keep ruining my life, especially not after everything she had done. And then, just when I thought I couldn't take it anymore, I received another message from Morrison. The investigation was moving faster than expected. He had already found something that would change everything. He called me into his office, and when I sat down across from him, his face was grim. "Mia," he said quietly, "I think we've found what we need." "What do you mean?" My heart raced. Grandpa wasn't just suspicious of Rachel. He knew something was wrong, and he took steps to protect you." The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. Grandpa had known. He had seen it coming, and he had taken action. It felt like a punch to the gut, but it also felt like a relief. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't imagining things. "He hired a private investigator," Morrison continued. "We've got footage, Mia. Video evidence of Rachel's actions. It's all there." I could hardly breathe. My sister had been caught. After all these years, after everything she had done, Rachel was about to face the truth. And I was finally going to have my voice heard. The day of the confrontation arrived faster than I expected. I sat in Attorney Morrison's office, staring at the cold, polished wood of the conference table. My palms were sweaty, my heart still not quite settled in my chest. This was it, the moment I'd been waiting for. Rachel had no idea what was coming. And I was determined to make sure she couldn't talk her way out of this one. Morrison had arranged everything. The evidence was solid, but the hardest part was facing Rachel in person, finally forcing her to confront what she had done. My mind kept replaying the images from the hospital, her calm demeanor as I was collapsing, her pretending to call for help while I was fighting for my life. It burned inside me, but I wouldn't let it show. Not yet. The door opened, and my parents walked in first. They looked drained. As though the weight of everything had finally caught up with them. Rachel followed them in, her heels clicking sharply on the floor, her usual confidence hanging in the air like a mask. But there was something different this time. The carefully constructed walls she had built around herself seemed thinner, like they were starting to crack. She was trying so hard to act as though nothing had changed, but I could see it in her eyes, her unease. I wasn't the only one who could see it. Morrison didn't even glance at Rachel when he spoke. "Thank you all for being here. We've gathered the relevant evidence regarding Mr. Gray's estate. As I mentioned before, I want to make sure we go through everything properly." Rachel took a seat, crossing her arms. I could almost see the walls go up around her. But this time, there was no escaping the truth. The things she had done, the choices she had made, were finally catching up to her. Morrison slid a folder across the table. The thick stack of documents was heavy with the weight of it all. "Here's the proof we've been able to gather." He opened the folder, spreading the papers across the table, like he was laying out a deck of cards in a game that had already been decided. "Rachel," he began, his voice measured. "We've found records of financial transactions and other documents that indicate actions taken on behalf of your grandfather in the months leading up to his passing. These documents show your direct involvement in his financial matters." He paused, allowing the gravity of his words to settle in. Rachel's face went pale. For the first time, I saw something real flicker behind her eyes: fear. Morrison didn't give her any time to respond. He pressed on. "In addition to these documents, we also have footage of your actions." His eyes flicked toward the screen in the corner of the room, where a video began to play. Rachel's face froze as the footage unfolded. The camera showed her entering our parents' house late one night, moving quietly through the hallway. The camera angle shifted, showing her opening my toiletries bag and pulling out my prescription bottle. She then swapped it with another bottle, one filled with something that wasn't my medication. Rachel's breath caught in her throat, her fingers gripping the armrest of her chair, so tightly her knuckles went white. She didn't say anything at first. She couldn't. The video was undeniable. The proof was right there, plain as day. I looked at her, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. You switched my medication, Rachel. You knew exactly what you were doing. You watched me get sick while I was trusting you. Her eyes darted around the room, looking for someone, anyone, to help her, but the silence from our parents was deafening. They had seen the footage. They couldn't protect her anymore. Rachel opened her mouth, her voice shaky. It's not what it looks like, Mia. She started, her words tumbling out in a desperate rush. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. I thought if I just did it, I could fix things. I had to do something. You don't understand, I was drowning. But I did understand. It wasn't that she was drowning. It was that she wanted to control everything around her. And when she couldn't, she resorted to manipulation and cruelty. You tried to kill me, I said, the words feeling foreign but necessary. You replaced my heart medication with vitamins because you were desperate. You needed Grandpa's money. And you thought if I was out of the picture, you could get away with it. Rachel's face twisted with frustration and fear. You don't get it. I had no choice. Grandpa was always so obsessed with you, with your perfect little life. He was always so disappointed in me, and when he started to get sick, I couldn't keep up with everything. I couldn't be perfect for him anymore. I needed the money, Mia. I didn't know what else to do. I stood up, the anger bubbling up inside me again. That's it, isn't it, Rachel? You couldn't be perfect, so you tried to tear me down. You tried to take everything from me, just to fix your own mess. Rachel opened her mouth, but no words came out. She had no excuses left. Morrison cleared his throat, breaking the silence. Miss Gray, we've already consulted with the investigator, and the evidence of the financial fraud is undeniable. We know about the loans, the signatures that were forged, and the money transferred to your accounts. Your actions put your grandfather's estate in jeopardy. Rachel's lawyer leaned forward, speaking up for the first time. My client maintains that Mr. Gray authorized those loans. He was mentally declining, and she claims he might have signed the documents without fully understanding. Morrison shook his head, unimpressed. The investigation shows otherwise. Mr. Gray underwent cognitive testing prior to his death and was in full possession of his faculties. He even took steps to ensure his concerns about Rachel's actions were documented. There's no defense for what you've done, Rachel. I watched her face crumble. The perfect image of a golden child shattered beyond repair. She had no more lies, no more excuses. The truth had caught up to her, and for the first time, she didn't know how to spin it. I couldn't stop it, Rachel whispered, her voice breaking. I couldn't tell anyone. I was so scared. Scared of what? I asked. Of finally facing the truth. She looked at me, her eyes filled with a mix of anger and desperation. You don't understand. You've always been the one Grandpa loved. He always thought you were better than me. I looked at her, no longer feeling the need to explain. This wasn't about Grandpa. This was about you. You always needed to be the perfect one, even if it meant destroying everyone else in the process. Rachel didn't respond. She couldn't. The weight of her actions, the depth of her betrayal, was too much to bear. And I could see it in her face. She knew she was about to lose everything. I turned to my parents, whose silence had been deafening. This isn't just about Rachel's lies anymore. It's about everything you let her get away with. You never saw me. You never saw what was happening. And now we're here. My father looked down at the table, his face pale. Mia, we didn't know. Yes, you did. I cut him off, my voice steady, but cutting. You just never wanted to admit it. The room fell silent, but I felt a strange sense of relief. This wasn't about revenge. It was about justice. And, for once, the truth was finally out in the open. After the confrontation, I thought I might feel relief. Maybe even triumph. But all I could feel was exhaustion. My mind was still spinning. The adrenaline wearing off, leaving me with a dull ache in my chest and a nagging sense of emptiness. The truth was out, yes. Rachel had been caught. But I wasn't sure how to move forward from this, how to process everything that had happened. I left Attorney Morrison's office with the weight of what had just transpired still pressing down on me. The video footage, the bank records, the emails, all the evidence, it was undeniable. Rachel had committed financial fraud against Grandpa. She had tried to kill me. And it was all there, in black and white, for anyone who cared to look. But it wasn't just about Rachel anymore. It was about the family I had tried to belong to. The family that had never really seen me. My parents were both in shock, barely able to process the depth of their daughter's betrayal. They had always been too quick to defend Rachel, too slow to see the damage she was causing. And now, I could see it clearly. They hadn't protected me. They had protected her. I spent the next few days barely able to sleep. I had to take care of things, but my body refused to cooperate. It was like I had been running on fumes for so long that when everything stopped, I could barely move. My thoughts kept circling back to the will reading, to Grandpa's final actions. He had known. He had seen everything. And in the end, he had protected me. He had left me the tools to expose the truth. The letters, the investigator, everything was in place. Grandpa had known this moment was coming. It didn't take long for the legal proceedings to ramp up. Morrison had arranged for Rachel's lawyer to meet with him. The charges against her were stacking up, and the reality of what she had done was finally hitting her. The weight of it all was too much for her to handle. Rachel had started making calls, trying to negotiate, trying to weasel her way out of it, but there was no escape. I was called into another meeting with Morrison, this time with a detective present. They had dug deeper into Rachel's finances, and the picture was starting to come into focus. The amount of money she had stolen, the loans she had forged, the gambling debts she had racked up, it was all part of a much bigger plan. She had needed the inheritance to cover her tracks, to clean up the mess she had made of her life. But she had miscalculated. She had underestimated me. "We've confirmed the transfers," Morrison said, his voice as calm and collected as always. "There's no question. The money was funneled into your sister's accounts, and from there, it was used for gambling, online investments that collapsed, and personal expenses. There's a trail that leads straight to her." I sat there, feeling numb. Part of me wanted to be angry, but I couldn't summon the energy for it. Anger was exhausting. All I felt now was a quiet, steady determination. Rachel was going to face the consequences. And I was going to make sure of it. The detective spoke next. There's also evidence that points to Rachel's actions leading directly to the manipulation of your health. The pills, the timing, the fact that she was aware of your medication schedule. It all adds up. We're going to make sure the full extent of what happened here is brought to light. It felt like a small victory, but it wasn't enough. Not yet. I needed more. I needed to ensure that this wasn't just about Rachel facing the music. It needed to be about me reclaiming my life, about making sure I could move forward without the shadow of my family's indifference hanging over me. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. What happens next? I asked. How do we proceed? Morrison looked at me, his expression serious. We'll move forward with the criminal charges. But you'll also need to testify. You need to make sure your side of the story is heard. You're not just a victim here, Mia. You're the one who caught this, who brought it to light. You'll be the key witness. The thought of testifying terrified me, but I couldn't back down now. Not after everything Rachel had done. Not after all these years of feeling invisible, dismissed, and finally realizing the truth. I wasn't the one in the wrong here. Rachel was. And it was time for her to face the consequences. I'm ready, I said, even though my voice sounded shakier than I wanted it to. I'll testify. I'll do whatever it takes. Morrison nodded, approving. We'll prepare you for it. But you need to know, this isn't going to be easy. There will be pushback. Rachel's lawyer will try to undermine your testimony, twist things to make it seem like you're exaggerating or making things up. But you have the truth on your side. I nodded, feeling the weight of his words. I didn't care what Rachel's lawyer tried. I had been silent for too long. This time, I would speak. The rest of the meeting passed in a blur. I agreed to everything Morrison suggested, and we set a date for my testimony. As I left the office, I felt a strange sense of resolve settling over me. For the first time in my life, I wasn't hiding from the truth. I wasn't running from the things that had hurt me. I was facing them head on, ready to take control of my life again. When I got home, I found myself standing in front of the mirror, staring at the woman who had emerged from the chaos. She wasn't perfect. She wasn't flawless, but she was strong. Strong enough to face her past, strong enough to fight for what was right. And for the first time in a long time, I was proud of her, proud of me. The courtroom was everything I had imagined it would be, and nothing I expected. The sterile air, the sharp clack of the gavel, the way everyone seemed to be watching me, waiting for me to speak. I hadn't imagined it would feel this overwhelming. But I wasn't here to win some petty argument, or to have my feelings acknowledged. I was here to speak the truth. And that was something I could finally do, no matter how much it terrified me. I walked into the courtroom with my head held high, the evidence in my hands, and a sense of purpose I had never known before. The weight of what I was about to do pressed down on me, but it wasn't the same as the weight of fear I used to carry. This was different. This was the weight of responsibility. Responsibility for myself, for Grandpa's legacy, and for exposing Rachel for what she had done. I could hear my heart pounding in my chest, but it wasn't the erratic rhythm of panic. It was steady, strong, the rhythmic sound of determination. As I walked to the witness stand, My mind flashed back to everything that had brought me here. The countless years of being overlooked, of being invisible, of being the one who always had to swallow her anger, her hurt, and her fears. But I wasn't invisible anymore. As I sat down in the witness chair, I felt a surge of power that surprised me. I had feared this moment for so long, but now that I was here, I wasn't afraid. This wasn't just about me anymore. It wasn't even about Rachel. It was about standing up for the person I had buried inside myself for so long. Miss Gray, the attorney began. Please tell the court what happened in the days leading up to your hospitalization. I took a deep breath, gathering my thoughts before I spoke. I had been feeling off for days. I started, my voice steady despite the storm inside. I thought it was just stress from Grandpa's death. But when I arrived at my parents' house, I noticed something strange about my medication. It wasn't right. It wasn't the medication I had been taking for my heart condition. I paused, letting the words settle in. The courtroom was silent, all eyes on me. I started to feel worse. My heart was racing, I was dizzy, and my fingers started to tingle. But I didn't know what was wrong, not until later. The lawyer nodded, taking notes, but his attention never left me. What happened next? Next, I collapsed. I said. At Grandpa's will reading, my heart just gave out. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. But instead of calling for help, Rachel stood over me, watching me die. She pretended to call 911. But her phone wasn't even on. She knew exactly what she had done. I could feel the eyes of the room on me, and I didn't care. This wasn't about their judgment. This was about the truth. And I was going to make sure it was heard. Rachel swapped my blood thinners with B12 vitamins. She knew exactly what would happen. She watched me deteriorate. She even commented on how pale I looked, as if she was waiting for it to happen. I looked directly at Rachel, whose face had gone pale. You didn't just let me get sick, Rachel. You did this to me. You tried to kill me. Rachel's attorney stood up quickly, trying to interrupt. But the judge silenced him with a quick gesture. Please continue, Miss Gray, the judge said, his voice calm but firm. I took another breath, steadying myself. The hardest part was coming. The part where I had to expose Rachel for everything she had done. The part where I had to make sure no one could deny the truth anymore. After I collapsed, Rachel pretended to be concerned. But she knew exactly what had happened. She knew she had switched my medication. She had been watching me closely, making sure I took the pills at the right time, knowing that if I didn't have my blood thinners, I would get worse. I wasn't the one who was wrong, Rachel. You were. And you've been lying to everyone, pretending you didn't do anything wrong. The room was completely still. I could feel the tension hanging in the air, thick and heavy. But I didn't look away. I couldn't. This was my moment, and I was going to make it count. Rachel's actions didn't just affect me. I continued. She stole from Grandpa. She forged his signature on loan documents. She used his money for gambling and personal expenses. She stole everything from him. And when she couldn't get away with it anymore, she tried to cover it all up by hurting me. Rachel's face was a mixture of anger and something else, something I hadn't seen before. Fear. She wasn't in control anymore. And she knew it. Mia, please. Rachel's voice wavered, but she quickly regained her composure. You don't understand. Grandpa was losing his mind. He didn't know what he was doing anymore. I needed to fix it. I couldn't let him ruin everything. I shook my head slowly. No, Rachel. You didn't need to fix anything. You just wanted to control everything. And when you couldn't, you destroyed it. You destroyed everything, and now it's too late to hide. Rachel's lawyer tried again to interject, but the judge held up his hand. We'll allow the witness to finish. Please continue, Miss Gray. I took a deep breath, my heart still pounding, but now with a sense of purpose. This is bigger than just money. It's about trust. It's about the lies you've told, Rachel. The lies that have hurt so many people, including me. I've spent my entire life letting you get away with it. But not anymore. Not this time. The room fell silent again, but this time, it wasn't the heavy silence of doubt. It was the silence of truth, of the entire courtroom, finally understanding the depth of Rachel's betrayal. She was no longer the golden child. She was just a woman who had been caught. I stood up from the witness stand, feeling a quiet strength within me. The worst of it was over. I had told the truth. I had exposed the lies. And now there was nothing left for Rachel to hide behind. The judge turned to Rachel's lawyer. We'll adjourn for the day. The evidence presented here is clear, and the testimony given will be taken into account. As I walked out of the courtroom, I didn't feel the weight of the world on my shoulders anymore. I felt lighter. I had faced my fears, and I had spoken the truth. And for the first time in my life, I felt free. The months after the trial felt like a blur, but in the best way possible. For the first time in my life, the weight that had pressed down on my chest, for as long as I could remember, had been lifted. I wasn't invisible anymore. I wasn't the quiet daughter in the corner, living in the shadow of someone else's achievements. I had finally found my voice, and it had made all the difference. I had moved into a small apartment in the city, far from the house where I had grown up. It felt like a fresh start. The old place, with its memories of quiet meals and long silences, didn't feel like home anymore. But this apartment, this space, was mine. It was where I could breathe, where I could be me, without feeling like I had to prove something to anyone. The community center, named after Grandpa, had been my first real step forward. The Victorian building, once dark and empty, had been transformed into something warm and inviting. The garden was filled with flowers, just like the ones Rachel had always adored. It was the perfect tribute to him, to the man who had seen me, even when no one else did. The old house was now full of life, filled with people who would come to seek comfort, warmth, and community. I had no idea that something like this would come from everything I had endured. But there it was, a legacy that meant more to me than anything I could have imagined. On opening day, I stood at the entrance, watching people trickle in, curious and eager to explore what had been created in Grandpa's honor. I smiled as an elderly woman approached me, her face uncertain but her step slow and steady. She looked at me and hesitated for a moment, then reached out her hand. "Welcome," I said, my voice warm, though my heart was still a little raw. "Would you like to come in?" She smiled back at me, the hesitation fading. "I think I would. This place looks beautiful." And in that moment, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. This was my home now. This place was where I would build my future. Not just for myself, but for everyone who needed a second chance, a safe space to heal. I wasn't the person I had been before. I had been broken, but now I was whole. As I watched people begin to mingle and take in the space, I felt something shift inside me. A small weight, one I hadn't even realized I was carrying, seemed to lift. I wasn't defined by my past anymore. I wasn't defined by Rachel's cruelty, or by my parents' failure to see me. I had built something on my own, and it was enough. Months passed, and I found myself at a point where I could look back at the pain, without it defining me. I had spent so many years letting Rachel's behavior shape my self-worth, but no longer. She had tried to destroy me, but she couldn't. She had underestimated me in every possible way. One afternoon, as I sat in my office, the phone rang. I recognized the number immediately, Attorney Morrison's office. I hadn't heard from him in a while, and the thought made my stomach tighten with curiosity. "Hello," I answered. "Mia." Morrison's voice came through the line, warm but professional. "I just wanted to let you know that the final judgment has been made. The court has ruled on the restitution for Rachel, and she's been held accountable for her actions. We've also had a hearing regarding her probation, and she's being monitored closely." I felt a strange sense of relief at his words, but there was also something else, something deeper. The finality of it all. Rachel's choices had consequences. Real, lasting consequences. And I had been there to ensure that justice was served. "Thank you," I said quietly, feeling the weight of it all settle around me. "I appreciate everything you've done." There was a pause on the line before Morrison spoke again. "I know this hasn't been easy for you, Mia. But you did the right thing. You gave a voice to the truth, and that's something not everyone can do." I swallowed hard, my throat tight. "I'm still learning to believe that." "Believe it," he said. "You've done something important. You've reclaimed your life." That was all I needed to hear. For so long, I had been trying to prove myself to others. I had been looking for validation from my family, from people who couldn't see me for who I was. But now, I understood. The only person I needed validation from was myself. I hung up the phone and looked around my apartment, at the space I had created for myself. The soft light of the late afternoon filtered through the windows, casting long shadows across the room. For the first time in a long time, I felt at peace. I had no desire to reconcile with Rachel. She had chosen her path, and I had chosen mine. What mattered now was that I was moving forward. I wasn't the same person I had been when I walked into that courtroom. I wasn't the same person who had lived in the shadow of a sister who seemed to have it all. I was someone new, someone stronger, someone who knew her worth. As I stood up and walked to the window, I looked out at the city below. The sun was setting, casting a golden hue over everything, and I felt something deep inside me stir a sense of hope, of possibility. I didn't know what the future would hold, but I knew it was mine to shape. I wasn't afraid anymore. I wasn't hiding. And that, I realized, was the greatest freedom I could ever have.